Well, they're not being persuaded to back a fascist. They're not being persuaded to back a regime that is occupying American cities, that is starting unnecessary foreign entanglements, that is trampling on the Constitution. They're not into that, Michael. I think you know that. I think everybody paying attention knows that. And anybody who's been watching the election returns for the last 15 months in special elections and off-year elections has seen that. The regime is being crushed every time there are free and fair elections, which is why I believe they are ramping up threats against our democratic infrastructure, because they are worried about free and fair elections taking away their power, and they don't want a fair fight. They do not want a fair fight. The bad news for them is that's not up to them. That is not up to them. And part of the point of showing up with the largest protest in history on March 28th, as I believe we will do for No Kings 3, is to show them and everybody else that democracy is reasserting itself whether they like it or not.
I fundamentally agree with you on the democracy argument and the rejection of fascism. I also think this conversation would be different, Ezra, if the economy were working for everyday Americans. We know in our own lived experience, anecdotally, it is not. It's also what voters are saying in polling. This is an AP NORC poll. The question was, do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president? That number was 62% disapprove, 36% approving. And it's interesting to me because those numbers almost exactly mirror, Ezra, the question on the economy. What share of Americans approve of the president's job? Wait, this is asking the same question, right? There was an economy question in here somewhere. You get the idea, though, which is like, I think it is a 1-2 punch. And I think that's part of what you saw in Virginia and in New Jersey. You lead with affordability, you talk about the economy, but you land on this question of democracy.
Alicia, you took the words out of my mouth. It's something that we say at Indivisible all the time, this 1-2 punch. Because Trump won in 2024 on the argument that he wasn't part of the status quo, that he was going to lower the price of eggs and bread, that he was going to get you a better job, that he was going to make the economy work for you. And part of the argument is the affordability argument. He's not doing any of that. He's clearly not doing that. People are not better off now than they were before. But the other part is, why isn't he doing any of that? He's not doing any of that because he's focusing on enriching himself, on attacking Venezuela or Greenland, on terrorizing the Twin Cities. What is he up to? It makes no sense. Why would this guy deserve more power, another 2 years of Congress? That's an easy argument to make because it makes sense to everybody watching what's going on. And when we show up in force on March 28th with massive nonviolent protests, we put a spotlight on all the random other stuff he's doing rather than focusing on improving your life. And as we head into the general election, exactly as you said, 1-2 punch. He wants to be a king to enrich himself. He's selling you out. He's not doing anything for you. And that's a message that resonates with Democrats, resonates with independents, and registers with Republicans who voted for Trump hoping for something that they haven't gotten.
Yeah, I mean, look, President Obama has been in the news, obviously, as of late this week. He was at the All-Star game this weekend. But people forget many of the voters that voted for President Obama turned out and then voted for then President Trump in that 2016 election. So there is some connective tissue there. You told Mother Jones that we, as in Indivisible, are developing organizational capacity that allows us to pull off historic levels of engagement in between these tentpole events. So the No Kings protest is not just about the protest one day, just the one march. But I do think it is filling a gap and a void that people have. There are a lot of people that are fired up, that are paying attention. This idea that the voters aren't paying attention, I think is a bunch of BS. There are some people that are paying attention, but they're not as engaged. But there are a lot of Americans that are very engaged and looking for somewhere to put their energy, and they're not just trying to wait until the next election.
Look, I think that's really important. One thing that really bugs me, and I see Democrats do this sometimes too. They see a big crowd of people out in an off year and they say, all you people, remember to vote. And the response of the people in the crowd is like, what are you talking about, vote? There's a fascist in the White House and the election is a year away, or in this case, a little bit less than a year away. Give me something to do right now to stand up for my community. Give me something that I can do to actually show that I'm standing up for my rights. And what I think about on that, Simone, is 2 days after the murder of Alex Preddy in the Twin Cities, one reaction you could imagine that is people all over the country see that and say, oh, I don't want any of that. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to keep myself safe. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm not going to do anything in public that shows I'm against this regime. We offered a training, eyes on ice training, to train people on how to do exactly what Alex Preddy was doing, exactly what Renee Good was doing. Exercising their First Amendment rights to stand up in defense of their neighbors. We had more than 200,000 people join that training 2 days after Alex Preddy's murder. People are hungry to be part of the fight for democracy right now. No Kings is a big day protest. I think it's very important. But to your point, it's a one-day protest. That's not how we save democracy. It is a tool for growing the movement of people who are going to stand up in their own community in places like Gustavus, Alaska, population 665, or Coloma, California, population 372, Elkton, Oregon, population 183. Elkton, Oregon has a No Kings protest on the map for March 28th. There are going to be thousands of these events in blue states, in red states, in purple states, in urban communities, suburban communities, rural communities.
Essential. That very tough wording in an op-ed from New Hampshire State Rep Wendy Thomas, who represents the town of Merrimack, where ICE wants to turn a warehouse into a huge Trump prison camp. Joining us now is State Rep Wendy Thomas of New Hampshire. Representative Thomas, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So I should just tell you, my office, we reached out to Governor Ayotte in New Hampshire today. We haven't yet heard back. But can I just get your take, your read on what's going on here with your governor? She's refusing to say whether or not she wants this Trump prison camp or not in Merrimack. And she's professing to be basically confused and unaware that it's happening. It's very hard to follow from the outside.
Well, to me, that smacks of either incompetence or lying, as I wrote in the op-ed. There are all sorts of things that are happening simultaneously. One is that the owner of the warehouse turns out is a large financial donor to Kelly Ayotte's campaigns. So we've got that problem. And the fact that she keeps saying that it's up to the towns. It's up to the towns. I'm going to let the towns decide. Well, our town has already decided we don't want this. We have a town council government, 7 members. They sent a letter down to Washington that said we don't want this in our town. And Ayotte is still dragging her heels on this. She's just... You know, I saw what you were saying earlier about, you know, the ICE facilities that are being closed down and being stopped. And that's not going to happen in Merrimack. The warehouse has been sold. We are going to have an ICE detention center in our town. And this is the same town that a couple weeks ago, the biggest discussion in our town was a rooster noise ordinance. You know, we are just, you know, we're not a big town. We're a little town. We're a town. We've got 30,000 people.
I know that you led a community meeting over Zoom on this yesterday with a couple of your fellow Democratic lawmakers, some other local leaders, too, from Merrimack. And from what I understand, you got a really big turnout for that, and your constituents have been pretty up in arms about this. What came out of that meeting? What are you hearing from your constituents? What other options do people feel like they might have at this point?
Well, about 80 people attended that Zoom, which was pretty amazing for a Sunday night Zoom in New Hampshire. People are terrified. I'm hearing from constituents that are people of color that if ICE is in our town, they don't want to leave their homes. They're not going to send their kids to school. I mean, we're seeing what's happening in Minnesota. You know, we're not blind. We can see the illegality, the violence, the disregard for human life, really. That's what it comes down to. So people are terrified. The other thing around this facility that they have purchased, now the deed has not been registered, so we don't know exactly who bought it yet. But the longer they take to file the deed, the more it looks like the government has gotten it. And trucks are going in with supplies and setting up equipment. So it's pretty clear what's happening. But there's a child care facility that's very close to this detention center. It's the Merrimack YMCA, and they just expanded their child care facility. So that's very close by. And a butter to the land that this facility will be located in is the Nashua Gun and Nashua Gun Club. So they use it to do target practice, and so you're going to have target practice right next to this facility. This facility is also located on contaminated PFAS land, and that's something that is an issue.
Well, somewhere in America right now, there is a lawyer who has expertise in matters like these, who is wondering whether or not they should stick their hand up and try to volunteer to help the people of Merrimack. State Representative Wendy Thomas, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate it. Stay in touch with us as this moves forward.
Never stop. They never did. But of course, it's only going to heat up, as it literally heats up, right? Like the movement against Trump will frequently heat up as things, literally get warmer. The temperature, and I think that's really troubling for Trump. A lot of people protested him last summer, right? During the first round of the No Kings Right. And there was, multiple layers of it, right? And they got bigger and bigger. And the second one they did was one of the biggest single layers of protest in America history. And the second one they did was one of the biggest single layers of protest in American history. It one of the biggest protests in American history. And therefore it ranks properly somewhere on the list of one of the biggest protests in world history. It really is special. And they never stopped protesting. A lot of those protests kept going against different actions. And a lot of those people were still out there. People were protesting ICE in many polls and in other cities. And I definitely think it's only going to get worse for Trump, because he had not started to fully crater in popularity in the summer. It started in the summer, the sharp decline, but it really started to hit like rock bottom, and it could still go lower. But it was in the fall, in the late summer. Every fall when the files started, in the late summer, early fall, when the files started to, the file push really happened. And right now, Donald knows he's more headed than he's ever been. His policies are sicker than they have been ever. I think this next summer could be bigger than the George Floyd summer, and he's scared.